I saw something crouched in the road driving around one night. Its eyes glowed when my headlights hit it, so I assumed an animal of some sort. But when I got within about 15 feet of it, it stood up and looked like a girl standing there. I slammed on my brakes immediately, but suddenly the road was just empty. My friend in the car hadn't seen anything, but asked me a few minutes later if it looked like a girl. He'd apparently seen something similar with his sister a few weeks before, in the exact same spot. I was out partying with my friends and came home pretty late. I didn't want my parents asking questions, so I snuck in through the garage. The door was locked, but I had a key. I turned the key to unlock it, but then I heard an abrupt snap and the door locked again. I repeated this 3 times. Each time I unlocked the door re-locked. Exasperated, I cried out, "Mom, it's me." Then I heard the door unlock. I opened the door and no one was there. About a year ago, I was up watching movies late at night when I got hungry and went downstairs for a snack. My room is across from my daughter's room, and her door was open. As I was coming back upstairs, I start turning left towards my room when I hear, clear as ever, "Daddy, can you close the door?" I turn around, don't say much, and just close it. Once I'm back in my room, I lie down to watch TV when it hits me. My daughter isn't there. She's spending the night at my parents'. I get up and go to her room, and sure enough, it's empty. I woke up my wife and she thinks I'm crazy. Says I was probably tired, and maybe it was the TV. I remember the voice so clear and coming in the direction of her room. It's very possible that it was just my head playing games, but it definitely made me question a few things. When I was about 12 or 13, I woke up in the middle of the night and smelled my father's cologne. Thought it was a little odd since he lived about an hour away, but was too tired to care. Went back to sleep, woke up the next morning, and for some reason my mother didn't wake me up for school. My father had passed away the night before. Never told anyone for years about that night, but around the age of 23 I told my mom she was glad to know that she wasn't crazy. That same night she got startled awake, and the dog was staring at the door, wagging his tail. Almost like he was saying goodbye before fully leaving. My wife and I were driving up through northern Arizona on Highway 89 between Flagstaff and Page. It was about 1 a.m. as we were on 3rd shift at the time and often drove at night to avoid traffic. I saw a few sets of eyes glowing in my headlights a little ways up the road, so I let off the gas, slowing down to avoid hitting an animal in the road. When we drove by, we saw several dogs, coyotes on the side of the road, and I hit the gas and drove by. After we passed, my wife said one of them was running next to the car, and I looked over and saw it as well, probably 20 feet off the shoulder of the road. I floored it and looked over, and it stood up on its hind legs, that's the only way I can describe it, and kept pace with us for a couple seconds before turning away from the road and disappearing. This whole event probably lasted no more than 10 seconds, but it was seriously the most terrifying 10 seconds of my life. This was probably 20 years ago, and we still rarely talk about it. Used to live in a 2-story house with 5 dudes. The upstairs had a kitchen with a sliding glass door going out to the deck. The downstairs had a family room with one of those enclosed staircases that turned at the bottom, so you couldn't see the person coming down until the last 4 steps. One day I was playing SNEs with one of the guys, and we were the only 2 home. Heard the sliding glass door open and slam shut, then very loud and very fast footsteps pounding down the stairs, then suddenly nothing. But nobody came down. We both looked at each other like WTF was that? I called out the name of my BF since it was close to the time he comes home from work, but total silence. The 2 of us slowly crept upstairs to find the slider was locked and nobody else was home. We outside to chain smoke cigarettes until my BF came home 20 minutes later. I was 6 and remember playing in my room, and my grandpa walks in and talks to me for a few minutes. After a bit, he gets up and tells me to be a good girl for Mom, kisses me on the forehead, and walks out. Mom comes in about 5 minutes later hysterical and told me my grandpa had died overnight, and we had to leave to go be with the family 2 states over where he lived. 3:30 a.m. My buddy and I spent the night repoing cars. We pull up to the light in Manchester NJ of 527 and 70, going straight. In the left turn lane, getting onto 70 East, a blue 97 to 98 Honda CR-V. The person driving had no face, just blank. Like the green man from Always Sunny or No Face from Dick Tracy. My buddy and I both saw it. Nobody believed it. About 7 or 8 years ago, I visited a friend a few cities over. They live in a fairly rural area with some forested area behind their house. It was house, then 30 feet to a fence, then maybe 200-ish feet beyond the fence is this forested area. My friend and his family claimed spooky shit happened in this forested area, but I didn't believe it. Nevertheless, this kind of thing really fascinates me, so while I don't believe in paranormal or the supernatural, it's still interesting to humor the thought. I brought a hat with me when I stayed with them. It was a black hat with Jimi Hendrix signature embroidered on it, my favorite hat at the time. I was told by my friend if I tossed the hat beyond the fence, not necessarily into the forested area, it'd appear in or close to their house. So I did. Tossed it over the fence one night, and lo and behold, in the morning it was on their front porch. Whatever. Anyone could have done that. Nothing spooky about that. I tried it again a couple of times with the same end result on their porch or by my belongings indoors each time. And each time monitoring my friend in the process to make sure he doesn't grab it and move it. Whatever. His brother or sister might be in on it. I took one of my friend's items unbeknownst to him, a belt buckle, and threw it over the fence, noting where I tossed it so I can grab it later. I didn't have to, because it suffered the same fate on the front porch a couple hours later. This one confused me, but I was still skeptical, so chalked it up to one of their family members seeing me and doing it. This all culminated when my friend and I went into the forested area one night. We brought flashlights and I wore my hat. After a few minutes in, the flashlights went out at the same time. He stopped and told me to run back. I didn't question him. There might be a wild animal or something, and I don't care to get bit or harmed, so I bolted. To note is that he sprinted a few seconds before so he had a measurable head start. In the process, I dropped my hat. I didn't care, I ran. When we got back inside the house, my hat was waiting for me in my suitcase. No one was with us, especially no one who could have grabbed my hat and went the long way back to his house faster than us. My friend didn't grab it either, since he was already gone when I dropped it. To compound this, we were the only ones at the house that night, and it was locked. I still don't understand to this day, but I did leave my hat with him, half wishing it would appear at home several hundred kilometers away, but no dice. Some other weird stuff happened, but this was the biggest example of weirdness. One time our family dog ran away. He was super shy and scared very easily. We got him from an animal testing lab. So we gathered all friends and family which we could get our hands on, and shortly after he bailed there were numerous search parties, altogether about 24 people looking for him. After a whole day of searching without any sign of the dog, the sun was setting slowly. I was standing on the edge of the forest, where I searched and called for the whole day, and suddenly saw a deer just 15 meters from me, staring directly in my eyes. We stared at each other for at least a minute, no move and no sound. Then I asked with a smoothing voice, "Did you happen to come across a lost beagle? I swear to God." Till this day, the deer nodded and looked down on the ground where it was standing. Then it jumped away into the woods. I was thinking to myself that I just imagined that Nod and the dog could not sit next to the deer without making any noise. But I could not check, and yes, there he was sitting in the exact spot, scared to death and shaking of fear. I gasped and cuddled the dog, took him on my arm, and looked into the woods where the deer disappeared. There it was again, staring at me, directly in the eyes. I had tears of joy and was so unbelievable grateful, while at the same time confused as FAK. Since that day, I never ate deer again.